And I met him this morning because Slavenka, one of the guides over here, said, you have to interview this man. His story is absolutely amazing. And Richard very kindly agreed to share with us his story of Medjugorje. So can you start with us about how you actually came to Medjugorje? What was the story behind that?
So I originally came to Medjugorje in 2007. Due to my wife having issues, we couldn't have children, and she brought me along as a promise to our mother that if we were allowed to have children and able to have children, I would have to come with our child at age 2 to give thanks to Our Lady and walk with our baby up Apparition Hill. So that was my first encounter here in Medjugorje myself. Then later on, she came multiple times, probably 3 more times. And then when I became ill was the second time I arrived here in Medjugorje in 2014.
So that first visit, were you practicing at the time? Did it make an impression on you?
Yeah, it made a great impression on me. I ended up going to Široki Brijeg for a retreat with Father Joso at the time. So that was a major impact. Learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know about myself and about Our Lady and about God in general. So it did make a strong impact. Unfortunately, when you get back to the real world, as I call it, you get overwhelmed with the everyday stuff, and the peace goes away that you take with you from Medjugorje.
Yeah, so you're quite high-flying businessman, or really involved in your work at that time. So then a few years later, what happened?
So a few years later, 2012, on December 29th, 2012, I got diagnosed with a very rare form of leukemia called LGLL leukemia. Only 700 reported cases in the United States at the time. And the prognosis wasn't good. Of the 700 cases, I just happened to win the lottery and had a subset that only 32 people had, which was the same LGLL, but both my T cells and NK cells, meaning there was no cure. I would have severe bone pain, nerve damage, everything that comes along with the disease in a very rare form came attached with everything when I got diagnosed on December 29, 2012. And I reached out to the best doctors in the world, the man who discovered the disease itself, 3 of the top doctors, 2 in the US and 1 in France. And we worked together from January of 2013 all through November, trying to attack the issue, trying to solve the cancer. And I lost movement in my right arm. I had nerve damage due to the cancer. Severe bone pain. I was already in palliative care, which is usually when you have terminal cancer.
That's really at the end, palliative care. Wow.
So I got into palliative care in October of 2013. They put me on something called methadone for the pain. So I was taking high dosages in the morning, in the evening, along with the nerve medicine. And we did one last chance going to the Cleveland Clinic because my physicians suggested I go see another doctor that worked hand in hand with him. And ended up being another waste of time, waste of money. And by December, I was physically not able to work. My wife had to go back to work. I already had 3 children at the time, expecting a 4th child. So it was really tough. So not only did I stop working, she had to take care of the household while I was literally sick in bed most of the day.
Oh, that's an incredibly difficult time. And a young man as well. You're like 40 years old, was it?
I was 40 at the time.
Wow, yeah. And your wife, did she have faith?
She has always had faith, always a great, I say she doesn't have her mother is Mary. She is very devout. And in January, when the doctors all got together again after a dismal year trying to figure this out, they decided to put me on strong dosage of chemotherapy. And it was making me sicker and sicker and sicker. So in by the third week of January, which was a holiday in the United States, it was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I remember it clearly. That was on a Monday. The Saturday before, my wife had gone to Eucharistic adoration. And she came back and she said, listen, I'm in a Eucharistic adoration asking God for a sign. I think the doctors are not doing their job. I think the chemo is making you sicker. And I want you to stop taking it. And I told her, I can't stop taking it. Let me continue with what the doctors say. She said, do me a promise. If you see something, if you see a sign, please let me know. And I laughed at the time, and at the same time I felt bad. I was like, well, she really wants that miracle to happen. And that Monday morning, I had my chemotherapy pills in my hand. My water jug had just been emptied out in the house. So I went to go get water and it was empty. So I reached out in the refrigerator for a small bottle of cranberry juice. So I popped the lid and I'm about to take the pills and I see something on the lip of the bottle. It's a plastic bottle. And I looked at it closely and at first glance it looked like the miraculous medal of Our Lady of Lourdes. And I sat there and I called my son into the room and I was like, Ian, can you come over? He's like, yeah. It's like, what do you see there? It's like, the Virgin Mary. I was like, you must be kidding me. I'm going crazy. Valeria, come here, and she comes in. It's like, yeah. And I was like, what do you see there? And she goes, the Virgin. I was like, which one? The one we have hanging in the room, in the other room. It's like, so I'm not going crazy. And she's like, did you draw that? Did that come on the bottle? It's like, is it stamped on the bottle? Because it was, I would say, melted in the plastic.
Yeah, like imprinted.
Like imprinted on the plastic. And I could show you later. But
yeah, you have the photo of that.
Yeah, we have the photo. So I tried to wipe it clean, and I called my wife, and I was like, I just sent you a photo on your phone. Take a look. Is this the sign you were looking for? And she goes, yes, yes. And I was like, where is that? And I was like, it was on a bottle of cranberry juice I was about to drink. And she's like, call your doctor. I hung up with her, called the physician, and the first thing that came in, I was, hey, I was just thinking about you. Stop the chemotherapy. I was like, excuse me? We're looking at your blood results from last week. We're not doing a thing. So stop it. It's a waste of time. You're getting sicker, and just stop it. I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah,
so that's
mind-blowing.
So that's how devout she is and how spiritual she is. So.
Okay, yeah. So then what made you decide to return here?
So that was January, February, I was still sick, going through. So April 17th of 2014, I get called into my physician's office, and I took my two daughters, since I was stay at home practically with everything. And my physician walks in crying, and the first thing I tell him is, Doc, you have allergies or something this morning? And he's wiping his tears away, and I was like, what's wrong? He goes, well, I got really bad news. I was like, well, how bad is it? And he's like, well, your immune system is completely compromised. You're not going to die of the cancer. You're going to die of a common cold. I mean, you catch a cold right now, I can't assure you that you'll live. I mean, it could get complicated. So we're going to put you on different type of steroids, other medication, and if you get sick, call me. And all I can do is take care of you. I can't do anything else. So me being stubborn, I called the other physicians just to make sure, hey, listen, I know you guys gave me second and third opinions, and we all worked together, but they all came to the same conclusion. So that was the hardest thing, telling my wife, because not that I hid things from her, I just kept a lot of things to myself, not to worry her and the family. And you know, she was pregnant at the time.
Oh goodness!
And I told her, I was like, look, this is what the physician said. I can't do anything else. And she goes, well, there's only one remedy: disconnect yourself from the world we know and go to Medjugorje. I was like, come on, you know, I could barely, move. And she's like, go to Medjugorje, just completely cleanse your mind of everything and go pray. And I'm not saying it's going to be a miracle, but just go pray and see what happens. So I accepted her advice. She looked online and she said, look, there's a group of Americans that are leaving in a few days. So we called 206 pilgrimage group, 206 tours. And it was like, we got one space available, and we paid. And it took me 3 days even to get out. My flights were canceled. I mean, the most absurd things would happen to avoid me coming to Medjugorje.
Obstacles.
Obstacles that, I mean, sunny day, and all of a sudden, no, flight's been canceled. I was like, why?
Oh.
The plane didn't come in from New York, and you got to leave tomorrow. So I got upset. My wife's like, you know what that means. All these obstacles, don't worry about it. Let's pray about it. So I finally left 3 days late and arrived here on, it was a Friday night. I think it was the 26th of April of 2014, if I don't have my dates mistaken.
Yeah.
And Saturday I met with the group who was headed by Wayne Wable. And me and Wayne's lives crossed paths, even though I never read any of his books. That his book originally brought my wife for the first time to Medjugorje. So I guess the Virgin finally got us together, and that Sunday, Divine Mercy Sunday, we went to church outside of Medjugorje with the priest that was with the group. We held Mass, and I was in the back pew, and I finally broke down. I mean, I was upset. Slavenka Jelavic, the tour guide we had for the group, she came over and she was like, "Richard, what's wrong?" And I didn't tell anybody in the group I was sick. I didn't tell them I had cancer. I wanted to keep it to myself. And I'll be honest, I was a bit still, even being here in Medjugorje, a septic with everything. And I'm just being honest because that's how I was at the time, no longer. And she's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "Well, you guys already had the apparition with Vishka on Friday. I missed out on that. I'm sick, and I really wanted to be there to pray." And she says, "Well, Ivan, one of the visionaries, arrived yesterday. Let me see if I could do something, but I'm not promising anything."
Yeah.
So the next day she called me in the afternoon, and she's like, "I'm going to pick you up at 4. We'll head over to Ivan's hotel." We met Ivan, and he was very gracious, and he walked me over to a small chapel he has across from his hotel. He asked me if I prayed the rosary. I was like, "Yes." He goes, "Other people be here. It's going to be a very small affair." And he had the kneeler. I was in the first pew, so his kneeler was there. And he says, "When you see me kneeling, I'm receiving the message from Our Lady and speaking. At that moment, I just ask you, pray for what you're here for, but open your heart." He's like, "Be genuine about it, but open your heart. I've seen things happen here." And again, he didn't know anything that was wrong with me either.
Oh, right.
So they wheeled in a young child who was about my son's age, probably 7 or 8 at the time, with screws and pins in his legs, an Italian couple. I had a Croatian lady behind me with her son who seemed like he had cerebral palsy, and a couple other people that were
so
in.
there's very sick people there at the time,
So there were sick people, and then some other tourists that came in that I guess Yvonne had invited. So he comes in, and at 5:40 on the dot, he gets on his knees, and I look over at the child who was sick, and I see the child with a smile on his face, "La Gospa, la Gospa." And I was like, "La Madonna," I'm sorry, "La Madonna, la Madonna." And I was like, I guess I must be in really bad shape. I don't see anything. And I said, "Well, I got to pray." Yvonne said to pray. So at that moment, I closed my eyes to pray, and I went blank. When I mean blank, like a sheet of white paper, I mean, nothing came to my mind. And at that moment, I think I broke. I finally gave up and said, "Lord, if this is a cross I have to bear, if this is everything you want me to feel and have, I accept it." At that moment, I surrendered. I gave up everything at that exact moment. And I said, "If you can't do anything with me, please help this child. That's all I ask." And at that moment, reality finally hit. After years of trying to figure this out, I just threw myself at his feet, I guess you would say. And then within 30 seconds, maybe even less, I mean, time really was kind of surreal at the moment. I felt somebody cup my right ear, literally physically cup my ear and say in my ear, but in Spanish, even though I was praying in English. I speak Spanish fluently. That's my first language. And I heard a woman's voice clearly say in Spanish, "Sea responsable con la gracia que recibirás." Be responsible with the grace you have received. And I turn around to look at the Croatian lady with her son. I was like, "Why'd you just say that to me?" And she's looking at me with a blank stare saying, "Nene, shh, be quiet." And I see Yvonne still kneeling. I was like, I must be going crazy. So I closed my eyes again, and within seconds, the same thing. Ear cupped, physically felt somebody cup my ear and say, sea responsable con la gracia que recibirás. And I turned around again, and she's looking at me mad. She's like, turn back around, don't look at me. Yvonne stands up and goes behind the altar with a translator and starts to translate the message from Croatian to Italian and English for my benefit and the benefit of a couple other people, I guess. And I'll be honest, again, I was a skeptic. I thought I auto-suggested this to myself. I said, maybe this is something I'm making up in my mind to make me feel better. I didn't know what to think about it at the time. Then he starts with a message, which to me was very generic. I was like, oh, a generic message, you know. Our Lady says to follow in the steps of her Son, Jesus Christ. And then it goes, and Our Lady said, to be responsible with the graces you receive.
Wow.
And when he said that, the hair on the, and I was like, well, he's literally talking to me directly. And I heard that and couldn't believe it. And he kept the translation going, and then things ended. I was the last one to leave the chapel. And I shook his hand and hugged him, and he's like, did you find what you're looking for? And I was like, to be honest, I'm more confused than ever. So I walked, took a taxi, went to the hotel, and ran into the priest who was with our group. And I asked the father, do you drink? He's like, why? He goes, I need to talk to you about something. So we went, had a couple beers, and explained everything that had happened to me in detail. And he kept calling me a doubting Thomas. He's like, you've been healed. I was like, how can you say that? And he goes, I've been around here on this earth many times. I've been a priest for over 40 years. What you told me, I believe you. And I was like, and I think something might have happened. I was like, take the leap of faith. And I was like, what's that mean? He's like, give me all your pills. And I was like, well, medically speaking, if I stop taking my pills, not only am I going to be in pain, I'm going to get sick. Because the methadone, you can't just stop. You have
to slowly cut it back,
Cut it back. If not, you get sick and you could die. So I gave him the pills, and he goes, we're in the same hotel. If you get sick, just knock on my door. So that was, I believe, the 28th of April, 29th of April, 30th. And the first, so for 4 days, I mean, I walked to Krisovac with pain, but felt better. I started having some changes in the pain level. Flew back to North Carolina on May 2nd. First thing I did was go to the hospital. And asked for a blood test. My doctor asked why. I was like, he was like, okay. And then he got upset at me and says, what about your refill for the methadone? And I was like, no, I stopped taking it. And he used an expletive I can't use here, but he used an expletive.
You've probably been very worried, concerned about it,
So he used an expletive because he thought I was lying to him. And I was like, Doc, I promise you. He goes, well, we'll look at the levels in the blood, because all that, we'll do a toxicology as well. And he calls me 2 days later and says, I need you to come back to the hospital. So I rushed back to the hospital. He's like, something happened at the lab. We're going to redo the test. And I almost passed out. I mean, he took out an exaggerated amount of blood. I was like, what's this? And the nurse is like, well, doctor's order, so just bear with it. So I get a phone call 5 to 6 days later. I was in the middle of a business call, and the nurse, Peter, called me. And he asked me, can you get to the hospital now? And then the doctor took over the phone. He's like, yes, I need to see you immediately. I was like, oh gosh, this is it. Maybe it's even worse than I thought. So I get to the hospital, and I get to the hospital. They take me up to his office, and on his desk he had 3 sets of documents, lab tests. And he goes, I don't have to explain these to you. Read them, take a look at them in detail, and then we'll talk. So I flip the page and I look at so normally my blood level on the large granular lymphocytes in my blood would be at like 92%, which is extremely high. Normal humans have it at 40%. I was at 41 on the first test. Second test, 40. Third test, 40. Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, and the local hospital again. And I start laughing and I start crying. And he goes, you know what that means? I was like, yes. Cancer's gone? He goes, yeah, it's not that easy. He goes, scientifically, I can't explain this, so you're going to have to go in depth with this. And I was like, well, there's a slight problem. He goes, what is it? He goes, you're Jewish. And he goes, what's that have to do with it? And I was like, well, if you want the whole story, there's a religious, he goes, I want to hear it. So
Yeah.
he closed the door and we sat and I told him this whole story in further detail. And he looked at me and he goes, I believe you. I was like, really? He goes, I thought I'd be crazy. He's like, no, I believe you. First, the methadone, we looked at the levels and they're down, so I believe you went cold turkey on that. 2, the blood work doesn't lie, but I will do this. I will poke you, I will prod you, I will make your life miserable for the next 6 months. I need test every 2 weeks and some bone marrow aspirations, etc., which are very painful. If you accept that and the results continue the same, then we could come up with a better prognosis, and this is insane. So we did that for a 6-month period. My other physicians, since it was a team of physicians, we all talked almost every 2-3 weeks, and they kept seeing the same results. So I told each and every one of them the story. So my team was a Muslim, a Hindi, a Catholic, and
Jewish, is it?
And a Jewish.
Yeah.
So we had 4 different.
My goodness! So that's really like hitting him in their face. In medical science, there you are, disproving it completely. So yeah.
And then February 17th, 2016, I walked into his office. He called me in. I was like, "What's wrong?" He's like, "See all those boxes? Take them." I was like, "What is it?" He's like, "That's medical file. Everybody sent me their medical files.
Yeah.
We're expunging you, meaning it's not in remission.
Yeah.
It's just gone." And
wow. My goodness.
to this day. So.
Wow.
So my message to a lot of people is, and what I've spoken to with a lot of people is, we try to outsmart these types of issues, meaning I had a medical background and was very proactive with the physicians, but it's not until you surrender and you let God be at the steering wheel, and by grace and by fortune, Our Lady interceded at that moment with her son. But we're not in control of anything. It's God's will, whether it's good or for worse, whether we're in pain or we're not.
Yeah.
He's in control, and we have to let him steer the ship. I think we kid ourselves thinking we're in control and we're not. And that's the greatest thing I've learned, and I tell everybody.
Oh, wow, this is absolutely marvelous testimony. And what I like about it is that even you, who the healing came to, and that you would be, as another person, would be skeptical about questioning everything. And that's just a wonderful testimony.
Thank you. And we shouldn't question anything.
Yeah.
That's something else I learned too.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
And when you totally had the grace really to surrender, that's when God could speak to you.
And that's what...
this is going to mean a lot to a lot of people. Thank you so much, Richard, for sharing with us this testimony.
Thank you,
and
Rosa.
God bless you, and your family, and your wife too.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.